Alex McClafferty, welcome to the Story Engine podcast. I am so excited to have you on here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. And it's a pleasure to be aboard Kyle Gray's pirate ship.
So, oh gosh, in case you haven't seen it, he's teasing me for my wooden background or false wooden background, as it may. Anyway, Alex, we have a history coming into the show. We've been friends for a long time now, and I'm really excited to catch up on a lot of this. But first, I want to introduce you properly and traditionally on the show with the first question that I always ask my guests is, tell me about a moment in your life that has defined who you are and what you do today.
Wow. I feel like I should have prepared better for this interview. That's a really deep question. A moment that's defined who I am and what I do today. I'll jump into the company sale really quickly. So Kyle and I know each other from WP Curve. Kyle was our head of content, our content marketing extraordinaire back in those days. And we started that company 2013. Kyle, I think you joined it about 2014 or 15, something like that.
Right at the end of 14.
Yeah. And then we ended up being acquired by GoDaddy in 2016, at the end of 2016. And so that was the acquisition process for me was a real, I would say a gauntlet because I felt like I was going to make this deal happen, as in it was on me, and there was a lot riding on me. And so part of that was, self-reliance, being able to say, if there is an outcome that I want to kind of manifest or make happen, and if I do the right things and work really hard, I can be proud of my effort, but I can't necessarily control the outcome. So that was something that I had to, I really took away from selling that company, which was I didn't know what was happening on the GoDaddy side of the deal. All I had control over was how I showed up and the amount of effort that I put in and how I approached what I was doing. And that's stood me in good stead since then, which is being really working really hard and hoping for the best, but accepting that sometimes things won't go the way that you want them to. I was fortunate enough to get the outcome that I was gunning for with the GoDaddy sale, though.
Well, yeah, and congratulations on that, because I remember it is really exciting to have you on the show and reflect about those times, because I think both of WP Curve was a very defining time for both of us, and seeing that sale go through and seeing that whole process happen, at least from kind of a somewhat distant perspective, it was really impressive to see how quickly the company grew and how you were able to not only get it sold, but further scale it beyond there. And I'd love to hear kind of maybe a little bit before the sale of WP Curve and a lot of what you were doing behind the scenes then to scale it up and take it through its whole journey.
Yeah, so I was definitely a behind the scenes guy. Co-founder Dan was much more, I would say, in the limelight and out there, marketing his book and the other stuff that he was into. And I assumed the role of kind of, I don't know, what was I? I was like operations. I was coaching. I was leading.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was all over the place, and not really out in the public eye, but working very closely with the team to make sure that things were getting done. So one of the things that I took away from managing and leading people from a few years of experience is that I like to build teams that are self-managing at some level. So I was looking for people that were they didn't necessarily have to have a ton of skill. They didn't have to be the most expert in their field, but I wanted them to be very driven and have a lot of will and have a lot of, I don't know, drive to be better and drive to improve. And so we ended up building this awesome team of, WordPress developers who are all around the world, all had fun personalities, had a really, really good culture, which is sometimes hard to get in a remote team because you don't have that time for water cooler talk. And then
Especially
also,
since, yeah, all over the world, really not even the same time zone. I was so impressed seeing all of the banter happening on the Slack channel. People were celebrating each other's birthdays. It was an incredible feat to really have the team together the way it was. And I think it was such a unique service to be able to deliver on that promise of having somebody awake and ready to go anywhere in the world to help you with WordPress
and
issues.
not just awake and ready to go, but really motivated to do the work. That was the other thing, which was one of the team members, Tunbasan, who was based in Africa. This guy would like love to get on live chat and just talk to customers all day. Like that was his thing. And we had different versions of that level of kind of commitment and excitement for the work. And ultimately, I think that was a big factor in, the like why the company was attractive to a buyer like GoDaddy, and why it was, why we were able to take it and then scale it, because we had that culture. So a lot of my work, I think, in the early days was around building the team, making sure that people were looked after, making sure that people had the opportunity to provide feedback or had an outlet or had the support that they need. And I know that you and I had many a conversation about, here's a challenge. How are we going to overcome this? What's the next step? And I think I remember jamming with you on one particular thing, which was like the guest posting process or something like that.
Oh my gosh,
we
yeah,
went
the
we went
defining
deep on that.
moment, that was the turning point for me. I do remember this conversation because at the time I was just like, working with guest writers is like herding cats. I just need to become a better writer because I can do this faster than them on my own. And you were like, no, that's not how it needs to be. And truly like when things started to change. And then, yeah, we started honing in on the process of how do we set good expectations and how do we eliminate any kind of questions, any kind of issues before they even arise. And within that moment, in that turning point, and when we started to change and create a proper style guide, which has become the same as the foundation for the style guide and the strategy templates I'm using or I have in the story engine right now. But that was the moment. That's when I was able to go. I remember beforehand I was struggling to produce 2 or 3 great articles a month, and then all of a sudden we were hitting 10 consistently every month just from that change. So incredibly powerful stuff.
Yeah, that was fun. I remember marking up and giving you feedback, because we would refine and then have some like, I'd have comments or I'd have points of view, and I'd read through it as if I was a writer trying to get the points and make sure it was super clear. And again, like these are the things that happen in the background of a business, which is not necessarily the most glamorous work. It's not, front line where you're out with the shining lights or anything, but it's necessary because that's what scales. Those are the things that really scale. And we had a few of those different kind of projects within WP Curve that happened, and they were executed. And I think that kind of mentality of just getting in and getting the work done kind of pulled things through, and it permeated the team as well, which has a big focus on process and quality and figuring out ways to improve what was existing, which again, going into a company like GoDaddy, they had existing processes, they had existing structures, and we were like, those are cool, but is that the best way to do it? And, that creates some challenges and some ripples and whatnot, but it's part of the fun of being like the new company on the block and trying to like shake things up. So we took that to the big leagues.
And I think one of the things that really caught people's attention with WP Curve was this productization and this process. And this is something that you've continued to hone and refine and master. And you are now working with many different people to help them build their own productized services. I'd love to hear just a little bit about what does a productized service mean to you these days, and what are some of the key components of that?
Yeah, well, see, the funny thing about this is like a productized service is going to be different for each founder. I go like inside out as far as like what the business can be. So a productized service to me could be like a scalable coaching program, because I'm in the business of coaching, and at some point I just tap out at like 3 or 4 hours of calls a day. So I need to figure out a way to serve more people, but do it in a consistent manner, and even hopefully better than what I can do one-on-one. So with the productized services that I see coming through, there's a lot of folks that are inspired by the WP curve model, and they'll take that into, different verticals, whether that's live chat or lead generation or video editing or supporting another platform. But the principles are the same, which are, as a founder, you have a business that can run without you. You can like literally step back from the business and observe what's going on. You've got a team that has absolute clear definition of what their roles and responsibilities are. You've got kind of like a paint by numbers financial model as far as understanding, okay, at $50,000 a month in revenue, we know the profit margin is going to be this. We know we can reinvest this amount for growth. And this is what the value of the business is going to be. So I like having structure and process around these businesses, because when you have that, then you can kind of step back and go, okay, what else do I want to spend time on, and what else do I want to do? Which is what I did with WP Curve. In 2015, I kind of stepped back a little bit from that business and went out and did some consulting with SaaS companies in San Francisco, which was awesome because there was so much cool stuff happening, and still is today, and got to meet a bunch of founders of really big and successful companies and learn from those folks, and then go back and apply that to my business or other consulting clients, and really like free up that time. So yeah, to summarize all of that, productized service to me is a business in which you can like scale, step away from. It has a terminal value, so there's an asset that you're building rather than just cash flow from a consulting kind of a consulting offering. And it's run by a team of people that do the work that you could probably maybe do yourself, but it's going to be done a whole lot better through a team.
Absolutely. And when coming onto a productized service, this is something that's very attractive, and a lot of people are going for these kinds of things. But I don't think, unless you are very intentionally building a service like this, or you are intentionally trying to create these systems, I don't think it very rarely just kind of happens on its own. And I'm wondering, what are some of the first questions that you would ask somebody you work with, or some of the first places that you would start to look for opportunities for productization? Because I also think it falls on a spectrum. There's going to be, it's not something that you can just be one day not productized and then one day fully productized. I think it's a process, and kind of the other meaning of the word, and kind of evolving into that.
Yeah. So the first question I actually ask founders is like why they're building what they're building. So I use this framework, which is like assuming that you're going to be successful building this or any other business. Why are you choosing this one? And what I'm looking for is some conviction, because, you can go and flip burgers at McDonald's. You can go and, flip a sign on a crosswalk, whatever you want to do, but your like heart needs to be in it. And this was a mistake that I made with WP Curve, because I was never truly passionate about WordPress or even WordPress support. But if you are genuinely interested in the space that you're stepping into, like going through the ups and downs, like going through the highs and lows of the business is so much easier. If it's something that's kind of boring and you're not super interested in, then that's going to be reflected in how the business grows. So I look for some conviction up front. And then I start to take people through different frameworks to understand, okay, let's say you're a consultant and you want to productize your service. Typically, one of the challenges that consultants have is that they're an expert in their field, but they have a hard time distilling that knowledge to be able to pass it on for someone else to execute on their behalf. So you start to look around within the consulting offering as to what is something that a client needs on a repeating basis. So there's some like recurring revenue that can be generated from this offering. And so, that's going to vary from consultant to consultant, but consultants will often get in their own way because they're very good at what they do and they have a hard time letting go of the reins. So then you start to ask the questions of, okay, well, if you don't let go of the reins now, at what point will you be able to? And at what point will you be able to, bring in a team to do it? Because if you can't let go of a little thing, then how are you going to let this business run by itself? So as you can see, like a lot of that comes back to like mindset and looking at, what you want in the future versus where you're at today. And then other things that come to mind are what's the end game for this business, which is again something that in the WP Curve days we didn't get clear on until a year or so in. We started building this thing. We're like, this is really cool. We know that it solves a big problem, but like, what's our exit opportunity? What's the scenario for if we want to sell to another, if we want to sell to a hosting company, or if we want to sell to someone on market, or if one of us wants to buy each other out. We didn't have any of that clarity. So I advise people to start with the end in mind when they're building out a productized service, and then kind of paint or color in the lines as they go backwards, which is easier said than done, because I've seen it done and helped a lot of people do it now. But when you're starting out, it's like, okay, what's the first thing that I put a process around? I don't know, and then you just kind of get confused.
So one of the things you're doing now, you're working in coaching and helping other people do this, but you're still working on walking the walk in your own coaching business and in productization. Before we were talking just the other week, and you mentioned pretty much all of the services that you work with to grow your business are all productized services. I'd like to know, as a coaching business and growing your coaching business, what have been some of the most useful productized services that you've been using that have helped you grow and expand your reach and your message?
Yeah, there's some that I'm actively using, and then there's some that I'm going to bring into the fold. So one of my clients, his name's Justin, he runs a productized service called Video Husky, and they're basically the WP Curve for video editing. So I think his price point is around like $500 a month. And you send these guys raw files with a template of what you want it to look like, maybe some inspiration as far as style goes, and they'll chop that up for you and send it back to you, and you'll be able to go back and forward. So I've used those guys to help with video content. There's other productized services out there for podcasts, so that's something that I'm looking into right now. I use Lead Cookie, which is Jake Jorgensen's business, just to set up like connections on LinkedIn and post content, which is something that I know I should do, but I probably wouldn't do. And it's helpful to like stay top of mind with people. And who else have I used lately? I'm just trying to think. I also have a service for podcast booking. So there's a service, I think it's called Podcast Introductions, something like that. And they reached out to me after I was on Jake's podcast and said, hey, do you want more bookings, or do you want to get on more podcasts like Jake's? And I'm like, of course, I'm not going to go out and pitch myself to other podcasts. If you can, line this stuff up for me and get it on my calendar, I'm happy to pay. So those little things, they're often things that you need to do, and they add up in the long run, but probably someone like me, I don't prioritize them, and then I'm missing out on, potential intros or potential clients, or just, building some awareness or some brand.
They can be really powerful things to have these services working for you. And one of the beautiful things about it with productized services and software is where in the past you probably had to have a team of a dozen people or more all working for you now. But you can have a growing and thriving business that is able to have all of these people applying their expertise in exactly the way you need it. And just, the exact dosage that you need, because it wouldn't be worthwhile to have a full-time podcast outreach person on your team. And I think that's one of the beauties of services like this, and why it's so useful for entrepreneurs, and why there's such an opportunity to create services like this, because there's so many different needs that a business has these days that usually one person can't fill, every single one of these needs. But just by placing these in and perfectly applying them in those amazing places, it really helps you grow and scale.
Yeah. I've found it really helpful, and I probably save like 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, something like that, from implementing those couple. And then there's more that I can use that are at my disposal because they come to me and they'll say, hey, I need help with this or I need help with that. And I'm like, cool, like that's an interesting service. I could use that. And it helps me expand my footprint because I don't have any direct team members right now. I'm just like a one-man band, which is, challenging, but it's also fun to know that I've got a team of people that I can rely on to get things done that, I'm either not interested in or not good at. Those are the two gaps that they solve for me.
And within your own coaching business, and in the case of kind of applying these ideas to how you're working with people, you mentioned after 3 or 4 calls, one-on-one calls in a day, you're pretty tapped out. I've experienced that for sure, and I think a lot of people on the listening in have felt that as well. What are some of the things that you have done to start to scale up and productize your business, or how do you envision, what's your strategy moving forward to be able to expand and scale up while still maintaining the quality of what you're doing?
Yeah, I use constraints. So I say that I don't want to be on the phone for any more than like 10 hours a week. So I don't want any more than 10 hours of like contacts time. And by creating that constraint, then I have to get creative with how I fill out that time. So up until this point, it might be like, 8 or so hours of one-on-one time with clients each week, and then a couple of hours of group coaching. But what I found is with the group coaching, it's a lot more scalable. And it's also at some level a lot more useful because when you've got a group of people that are working in the same direction, then you've got this cross-pollination of ideas and different viewpoints. And, it actually takes a little bit of pressure off me to be the one coming up with all of the ideas and all the suggestions all of the time. So I moved from, I'm still a coach, but I'm also a facilitator looking at, in my current group, I've got, I think 6 people in there building out their own productized service. And I get to draw like insights and ideas and things out of that group without having to be the linchpin for all of them. And then I'll have my point of view, but that's fun. Like to me, that's fun. And I can also do that in such a way where when I have a program like that, instead of having, your typical membership site that's got a, like static content, and then you download some PDFs and do the work. What I do is I set everybody up with a Google Doc. And each week I drop new content into the Google Doc. Once they've uploaded their exercises, done the activities, I'll go in and I'll personally mark that up. And I can do that asynchronously. So if I'm traveling or if I get up early or something like that, I'll jump into each person's Google Doc and I'll be able to give them feedback, which is really, really useful to them, but not something that I could necessarily like fit into a typical daily schedule. So that gives me, again, it's leverage, but it's also leverage in a way that's useful to the person that is paying for the program. Because one of my experiences with group coaching is sometimes it feels like you get this kind of fractured or fragmented amount of time from the person that's coaching. And what I'm trying to figure out is ways to get even like closer to the work, but do it like deliver it in such a way where it's not reliant on me being on the phone. Like I can be like lying on my couch on my laptop, going through, marking these things up and adding comments and inputs and insights that, you may not be able to do in other coaching formats or programs.
I'd love to get a peek inside of the group you're working with. I'd love to hear, if possible, examples of businesses, but we can also keep them anonymous too. Some of the big like leaps forward, or as soon as somebody managed this process, hired this person, outsourced this thing, that they really experienced a big leap forward. What are some of the big wins that you've seen in the people that you've been working with?
So the challenge with actually building a productized service to me is the slow burn. So part of it, and part of what I'm dealing with the group that I've got a group of very successful consultants, people that are doing, like, have been in business for a couple of years for themselves, and they're like, okay, I need to figure out a way to scale what I'm doing. Now, what is the thing that I can scale? And so as like example services that we've got popping up, we've got podcast out, like another podcast outreach, but a much higher end offering. And that's by a lady named Bridget. That business is called Pod Squad, which I think is just like the best. I love that name. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. We've got Jake Jorgovan back in the mix, and he's doing work on content allies. And what he's trying to deliver is like thought leadership as a service. So especially at that consultant level, creating prompts for people that are, very good at what they do to be able to have continuous content, email newsletters, LinkedIn, all of the stuff that you should do, but you probably don't. And it's something that if you have a team of people like working on it for you, it just takes that pressure off. Then we've got some more specialized kind of, narrow focuses. So things like aftercare for very technical products, very technical platforms with more of an engineering focus. And then there's a couple other cool ideas like accountability as a service. So you know how you get a VA and then you hire them and you're like, okay, like what do I do with this VA? What one of these services will do, which is called, I think it's Task Done HQ. That business will be partly doing tasks for you, but also partly like keeping you on task and saying, hey, these are the things you told us that you needed done. We're going to help you get those done. Like, what else do you need from us? And be like a friendly nudge forward to get those things off your to-do list. So because of the phase of where these folks are at, is they already have established existing successful businesses and they're looking to move into productizing their service. And so they're not necessarily at the place where they're making big decisions and big hiring moves, but they've got positioning nailed, they've got their value proposition nailed, they've got a sales page, they've got, like an outreach, whether it's cold or warm, they'll have marketing plans and they'll have a roadmap to scale. So they walk away with all of that, and then it's on them to execute and, move forward. And the thing that I'm looking at is how do I support those people in an ongoing way, which is probably more of the same kind of group support, group coaching, and allowing them to kind of cross-pollinate those ideas and help each other out too.
That is really cool. And all of those sound like, very valuable services. I'm just already like all kinds of ideas are sparking on how I could use all of those things in my own life. I want to change gears a little bit and go back to a little bit of your story. You mentioned that while you were working with WP Curve, it was very much behind the scenes, team oriented, not so much marketing. And now as a high end coach working with very high profile, very intelligent entrepreneurs, you've had to move yourself more into the spotlight, coming onto podcasts, sharing your story and who you are. Can you tell me a little bit about your evolution from kind of going behind the scenes to becoming an authority in your own right? Because I think this is a really challenging transformation that many people, both introverted, extroverted, anybody who is trying to grow their business these days, share their story more, is often going to have a little bit of trouble. Oftentimes our genius seems so commonplace that we discount who we are. We don't feel like it's that interesting. Tell me about this journey that you've gone through and how you've evolved and changed over these years from WP Curve to now.
So it was actually born out of frustration with other coaches that were in market, and I would see these things online and I would just get really upset because I felt like people were being taken advantage of. So, 8-figure this and 9-figure that and blah, blah, blah. And most people are starting out in this place where they're like, okay, I'm good at what I do. How can I make that into a scalable business? So this idea of marketing really aggressively with private jets and, all of the guru kind of stuff, it just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And so I was working with Jake, who's a longtime client and also friend. And I was kind of bitching to him about it. And I was like, this is just not cool, man. And he's like, yeah, you keep talking about that. So you can either continue to complain to me about it, or you can go out and market yourself and make a difference, right? You can do it yourself and make a difference. And the way that he explained it to me and the way that he kind of put it back on me was awesome, because as much as I am a coach, my clients also coach me. And so when he says that to me, I'm like, you've really got a point. I can sit around and look at what everyone else is doing and criticize it, or I can try and show up and do what I do and help people. And that's what I do. So I had to figure out what my positioning and what my message is. And that's just me being me, which is being honest, sharing my story, trying to help people, and not bullshitting, because I just don't have it in me. I can't like fabricate, oh, it was so great and this is so wonderful and everything else, because the reality of building any business, or even, you know, as you would see in the early WP Curve days, like you can look from the outside in and go, wow, those guys have really got it figured out, or that's super easy. But every founder that I talk to, there's a reason that they're hiring a coach, and it's because it is hard. It's really stressful. It's really difficult. And I've helped a couple of founders go through really like significant acquisitions where the companies have been acquired by either a really big company or they've got a really big payout. And that is extremely stressful. So I talked to that. I talked to the stress that comes along with, you know, you think you get a big payday and then everything gets easier. For me, it got harder. It actually got harder because I had more pressure on me to make sure things were successful at GoDaddy, because I didn't want it to be a flame out or just something that got bought and shuttered. And so I'm like very authentic and transparent with all of that. And that being like speaking the truth has really helped me to like get out of my own head and not criticize or judge myself, and just say, look, I've got this point of view. This is my experience. Your experience might be different. Your point of view might be different. And we're both entitled to our own. So that has helped. That's helped a lot. But I have to really thank Jake for that, because he definitely got stuck into me a couple of times and was like, dude, get out there and start talking about what you know and start adding value to people, and stop complaining about these guys that are doing this guru marketing nonsense.
That's beautiful. And I think we could all do with a few less Facebook ads with gold-plated helicopters and things like that.
Well, I'm actually, so this is funny, man. I'm going to be shooting some video stuff for the next release of my program. And we came up with all sorts of random concepts. So one of them was like me shoveling like horse poo into a bin. Another one was, I think I've got a push mower for the lawn at this rental that I'm living at right now. And we were going to cut to me, like pan to me on the lawnmower that doesn't have a motor, kind of like,
yeah, those old like circle cylinder ones that, yeah. Okay. Those are getting really popular in my neighborhood. I've noticed recently.
Maybe it's a hipster thing. I'm not sure, but
yeah.
But the point is like, if you believe and you buy into the hype of like a private jet or a gold-plated helicopter, then you're probably not going to be a good fit for me anyway, because that's like a get-rich-quick kind of thing. Like the reality of business is it's hard work, it's a grind, you'll get good rewards, but you've got to put your back into it. And that's what, you know, we'll be shooting video around to say, hey, like you'll get to success, but it's not going to be, you know, all glamour and all show.
I don't think most of us, at least most of the people listening, maybe some of us do want helicopters, but I think what a lot of us aspire to is just a business that supports our life and our lifestyle and allows us to make an impact and show up in a way that we enjoy working every day, and also have plenty of room for all of the wonderful things that life has to offer us outside of working really hard.
Yeah, and I'm a huge proponent of that. Like one of the biggest milestones for me in the WP Curve days was to be able to take off and hike Machu Picchu and like step away from the business for 4 days and know that everything was going to be okay, and it was probably going to be in better shape when I got back than when I left. So to me, those are the little things. And like I've got a lot of friends who are in San Francisco building really big businesses or raising a ton of money, and I don't have any argument with that. Like if that's what you're interested in, that's cool. But you can also be happy with a business that does, you know, 6 or 7 figures a year, spins you off a good salary, creates a great cushion for your family or your financial goals. Like there's really no right or wrong. But I like to work with people that are clear on like what they're building and why they want to build it.
Alex, it's been so much fun talking and catching up with you again. And it's so cool to hear the impact you're making in many different places and with many of your clients who we've gotten to hear a little bit about today. I'd love to hear if you have any closing thoughts for us. And then where can we go to learn more about you and the brilliant productization you do?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the second question first, which is where to find me. So productized.co, that's productize.co. I've got a website and It's funny. I had a WordPress support business. It's like an okay website. It's not the fanciest website, but it kind of speaks to my idea of like, do what is necessary, not what is flashy. And that's probably my parting thought, which is we can get carried away with a lot of bells and whistles and things that we don't need. But I think keeping things really simple, getting to the essence and getting to understand exactly what your customer needs will drive your business much farther forward than tactics or hacks or any other sort of nonsense that you might distract yourself with. And those are the things that I try and help people with, which is to keep it super simple, get really clear, and keep them motivated and drive them forward. So yeah, keep it simple. That's probably my parting thought for the audience.
I love it. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.